Hello and welcome to week 6 of English 101. This week we're going to be talking about the rhetorical strategies. So briefly, I wanted to refresh you on what we talked about last week, which was rhetoric and the rhetorical situation. So remember, rhetoric is that art of effective or persuasive speaking or writing, and the rhetorical situation is essentially the big bubble surrounding any sort of persuasive oral or written argument we're given. So these are people, events, objects, and relationships that are related to some problem that can potentially be solved through presenting an argument to the right audience. So we went through and we talked about target audience, so the people who either need to be convinced to believe something or need to be convinced to do something, the purpose, so why are they giving this argument, what are they trying to accomplish, what are they trying to convince someone to believe or do, genre, so that's whether something is an oral speech or if it's a recorded video, if it's a movie, if it's an essay that you write. Those are all different genres of rhetoric. And then finally, stance. So what is the speaker's stance towards their subject? Is it positive? Is it negative? We gave that example of the Donald Trump tweet. If you need to take a second to look back at that to remind you about stance. So today we're going to be talking about the rhetorical appeals, which are the ways in which you appeal to an audience and convince them to believe you. So these are the actual tools that you use in order to argue with and convince an audience to believe something. So the first one that I want to touch on is pathos. So this is an argument based on emotions, desires, values, feelings, and beliefs. Usually we focus in on that emotions idea. How is the speaker making you feel, and how can that play into whatever argument they're making. So I want you can open this in a new tab, pause the video, to watch this advertisement by, I believe it's Bud Light or Budweiser. And we're going to answer these questions together. So watch the video and then come back and I'll talk about these questions with you. So this ad is addressing the problem of drunk driving. And obviously it's Budweiser, so they're trying to convince you to buy Budweiser. We can talk about why a little later. But the target audience, we want to narrow it down as narrowly as possible, remember? So we can say in general, the people who are going to watch this, who are buying Budweiser, we want to be 21 or older. So we can say they're going to be 21 or older. They probably are going to be dog owners or pet lovers, dog lovers. Otherwise, they wouldn't care about the main point of this entire video or the entire commercial. And we can say probably the age range is in 20s to early 30s, because that's about how old the actor in the video looks. And generally speaking, advertisers think of that age range as being, single people who might be living on their own with a pet, and would be most affected by the actual purpose of this video. So how this ad makes you feel, and remember, we're being specific. We're not just saying, well, this ad makes me feel sad or this ad makes me feel happy. We want to be as specific as possible. So at the beginning of the video, when he leaves the dog alone, we might feel guilty. Like, can you imagine doing that to your dog if you have one, or whatever animal you have? So we might feel guilty about that idea of leaving the dog alone and seeing it pacing around, waiting for its owner, and imagine if that owner never came back. You kind of put yourself in those shoes and you're like, oh man, I feel really guilty about even the idea of doing that to my dog. And then, of course, at the end, we get that sense of happiness and, to be more specific, relief. Because we're like, oh my gosh, yes, the guy is not dead. He didn't drug drive. He stayed at Dave's house. Everything's all good. So that idea of guilt to relief is something really important with pathos, because in an argument, it's really effective. It's human nature to want to feel happy, and want everything to be okay. So if they can manage to convince us that one behavior is going to lead us to feeling guilty and bad and, upset, and another behavior, a changed behavior, is going to lead us to feel happy and relieved, then we're going to change our behavior in order to feel that happiness and relief. So that's how that ad is actually working to play on your emotions in order to convince you not to drink and drive. The next rhetorical appeal is logos. So this is an argument based on facts, evidence, and reason. I want you to do the same thing here, where you go and watch this speech by Greta Thunberg, and then I'm going to talk you through the main points of her speech, and how she's using logos. So make sure you open that in a new tab. So Greta Thunberg is, and this is something you should do with all of your speeches. This is an example of the kind of speech that you'll be analyzing for your essay. But you should start out by asking who the speaker is, maybe doing some Googling about them. But I'll tell you about Greta Thunberg. So Greta Thunberg, when she gave this speech, I believe she was about 16 at the time. She is Swedish, and she's neurodivergent. She has started the school strike for the climate in Sweden and kind of became a global phenomenon. Was invited to speak at tons of climate change rallies, events, and she's just really passionate about environmental protection. And the school strike for the climate essentially saw her not in schools on Fridays every week, but instead sitting outside with signs saying, hey, we need to make a change. So where do we see logos being used in her speech? Well, she's constantly referencing facts and figures, different numbers about CO2 levels, and different plans and how much warming will happen. Her speech was given at the UN Climate Summit, so the audience of her speech is a bunch of scientists and researchers and politicians, policymakers. So if you're thinking about why logos, or facts and figures and research, is particularly effective for her topic, well, this is a science-based topic. And in science, they rely on facts and figures and research. So of course, logos fits the topic really well. And when you're thinking about audience, it also fits her audience really well because she's talking to a bunch of policymakers and scientists and researchers who already kind of speak that language of facts and figures and statistics and research. You can also think about it in terms of who she is as a person. So she's a teenage girl who's neurodivergent. So are they going to take her seriously if she just gets up there and, cries about climate change? Probably not. They need her to rely a little more on expert opinion or expert research. And then finally, she uses another rhetorical appeal. She uses all three, but she uses pathos, which is the one we've already covered. Obviously, she gets really emotional, really choked up, really passionate about this topic, showing that she really cares about this, and it's something to be taken seriously, and that it affects her life as a young girl, and maybe playing on the emotions of the older people in the audience who have children, who might feel that sort of parental a responsibility or a sense of guilt as the adults in the room who she calls out as not having taken as good of care of the world as they should have. Logos can also be represented by logical comparison or structuring an argument logically by drawing a conclusion from evidence. So I have both examples of that here. The picture on the right-hand side is an example of logical comparison. So they're showing you visually that on the left side, look at how many dishes this dishwashing detergent was able to wash. It's a giant stack compared to the right side. So thus you can draw the conclusion that the dishwashing detergent on the left is better. And this is exactly what I've written here as far as drawing a conclusion from evidence. You give evidence first. I washed 30 days of dishes with 1 bottle of brand clean and only 15 with the off-brand. And then you state your conclusion that proves your argument using that evidence. Since brand clean cleaned way more dishes with only 1 bottle, it's the better detergent. So that's what I mean by logically drawing a conclusion from evidence. And then finally we have ethos here. So this is where the writer or speaker presents themselves as credible, trustworthy, honest, and or ethical. So on the right here, you can watch this on your own, but this is an example of a very poor use of ethos. These are a bunch of really funny infomercials wherein we don't believe that the argument is credible at all because there are a bunch of actors pretending to have these problems, like trying to butter toast and the toast snaps in half. Problems that aren't real. So of course we're not convinced to buy those products because we don't see this, company as credible or trustworthy because it's a bunch of actors pretending to have problems that aren't real. Then you can take that and compare it to this video. So I want you to watch this in a new tab as well. This is a commercial from Dove soap. So it was made in April 2020. And of course, Dove sells soaps and, things for personal hygiene. And the ad is meant to make you believe that Dove cares about frontline healthcare workers. It's meant to make you believe that they care about your health, your personal hygiene. They're a soap company. It's important, obviously, during COVID that they're showing you that, hey, we care about your personal hygiene because, COVID can be stopped by washing your hands. And obviously wanting you to think they're an ethical company because they are supporting frontline healthcare workers, calling them brave, and they're also saying, hey, kind of by buying Dove soap, we're donating that money. So you're really, by buying soap from us, you're kind of just making a donation. So we're really ethical. Buy our soap. And of course, the subject of this commercial is really perfect for the time it was made because in April 2020, that's the height of the pandemic. Or, at the time we thought it was the height of the pandemic. It was the height of, I think, people being really afraid and really focusing on this in wider media.